At exactly 1:17 hours, on a moonless night in the eastern Bekaa Valley, inside a reinforced underground command node buried 12 meters beneath a disused agricultural warehouse, Commander Imad Khouri of Hezbollah's Nasser missile and rocket unit pressed 2 fingers against his earpiece and listened to the silence. Not the silence of inaction, the silence of everything being in place. For 22 months, this operation had existed only in encrypted files on air-gapped servers and in the heads of fewer than 9 men. Tonight, those files became kinetic. The plan had a single surgical objective: not to destroy Haifa, not to overrun the Galilee. The objective was to prove, in front of every air defense planner in the world, that Iron Dome, Israel's most celebrated technological shield, could be made to go blind, and that when it did, there was nothing left between a city of 300,000 people and the sky. The operation had a name: Mihwar, Arabic for axis. Tonight, the axis would shift. At 1:19 hours, Unit 4400's senior Iranian liaison officer, embedded 4 kilometers from the command node inside a separate hardened communications cell, transmitted the final authentication sequence to the MIHWAR-1 system operators. MIHWAR-1 was not a missile. It was not a drone. It was a truck. A single IRGC-developed mobile electronic warfare platform, roughly the size of a heavy logistics vehicle, built around a phased array active jamming suite operating across the S-band and X-band radar frequencies. These are the exact frequencies used by Iron Dome's EL/M2084 multi-mission radar, the system's eyes and ears. Suppress the radar, and the interceptor missiles have no target data. They sit in their canisters, armed, waiting, and completely useless. The Israelis had suspected for 3 years that such a system existed. Their intelligence files called it a theoretical capability. They were wrong about the theoretical part. The MIHWAR-1 vehicle had been in Lebanon for 11 months. It entered through Syria disguised as a refrigerated pharmaceutical shipment, disassembled across 6 different cargo pallets, and reassembled inside the Bekaa by IRGC Quds Force technicians who flew in and out on civilian documentation over a 4-week window. Israeli signals intelligence, Unit 8200, had come within 96 hours of identifying the anomaly in the vehicle's movement pattern. But a deliberate deception operation by Hezbollah's signals counterintelligence cell had redirected that surveillance thread toward a decoy site near Baalbek. The real MIHWAR-1 sat undiscovered in a farming compound south of Yomor, its antenna array folded flat beneath a metal agriculture canopy, for 8 months. At 1:21 hours, the vehicle's convoy, 3 trucks in total, MIHWAR-1 flanked by 2 decoy logistics vehicles, departed the compound on a pre-cleared route toward a firing position on the high ground east of Yaroun in southern Lebanon. The route had been sanitized. Every Israeli ground sensor, seismic device, and border surveillance camera along that corridor had been systematically mapped over 14 months by Hezbollah's reconnaissance cells operating in small, rotating teams. The cameras were not destroyed. That would have triggered an alert. Instead, at 1:18 hours, Hezbollah's cyber unit transmitted a carefully crafted packet attack through a compromised Lebanese telecommunications node that introduced a 7-minute loop into the video buffer of 4 Israeli border surveillance positions. The screens in the Israeli Northern Command surveillance room continued to display normal, empty road footage. The convoy moved through the dark undetected. At 1:31 hours, the MIHWAR-1 vehicle reached its firing position. The crew had 11 minutes to deploy before the next Israeli OFEC-16 reconnaissance satellite pass would sweep this grid reference. The antenna array unfolded in silence. No active emissions yet. The system was passive, listening, scanning the electromagnetic spectrum over northern Israel like a surgeon reading a heartbeat before making the first incision. At 1:33 hours, the MIHWAR-1 operators confirmed what pre-mission SIGINT had predicted. 3 active Iron Dome EL/M2084 radar systems were operating in staggered scan cycles across the Haifa Bay sector. Battery Aleph near Kiryat Atah, Battery Dalet on the slopes of Mount Carmel, and Battery Zion positioned north of Acre. All 3 were radiating normally. All 3 were vulnerable.
Simultaneously, in the wadis and tunnels of the Lebanese terrain between
between Bint Jbeil and Aita Ashab. The launch teams of the Nasser unit were receiving final coordinates. 47 Fajr 5 240mm rockets, pre-positioned in concealed mobile launchers, were being elevated to their firing angles. These are unguided munitions with a range of 75 kilometers, the backbone of Hezbollah's mass strike doctrine. But alongside them, in a separate network of hardened underground positions, 12 Burkan 3 ballistic rockets, Iranian-manufactured, GPS and inertial navigation guided, capable of striking within a 20-meter circular error, probable at a range of 150 kilometers, sat armed and targeted. Not for area saturation, for specific infrastructure. The Burkan 3s were assigned to the Haifa Bay Port Fuel Storage Complex and the Kishan Naval Base. And at a third grid, 41 Mohajer 6 Kasef variant kamikaze drones were loaded in sequential launch pods, their terminal guidance sensors slave to preloaded target imagery. Their job was not to arrive first. Their job was to overwhelm Iron Dome's engagement capacity at the moment the radar came back online. The mathematics of the operation were precise and cold. Each Iron Dome battery carries 20 Tamir interceptors per launcher, typically deployed in clusters of 6 to 8 launchers per battery. A battery's engagement computer, the Battle Management Control System, can simultaneously track and engage up to 8 threats at once under optimal radar conditions. Remove the radar, remove the eyes, and even 8 launchers full of Tamirs become 8 barrels pointed at nothing. At 0137 hours, Commander Khouri received a single encoded pulse from the convoy team. MIHWAR-1 was active. What happened next in the electronic spectrum above northern Israel was invisible to any civilian, and nearly invisible to anyone not sitting directly inside an Israeli Air Defense Command console. The MIHWAR-1 system emitted a precisely modulated barrage jamming signal across the S-band and X-band simultaneously, at a power level calibrated to saturate the side lobe channels of the EL/M2084 radar without triggering the full electronic attack warning protocol that would have immediately escalated the alert status. This was the operation's most sophisticated layer, rather than a blunt force jamming attack, which Israeli systems were hardened to detect and partially compensate for. MIHWAR-1 injected structured noise, a dense pattern of false radar returns engineered by IRGC electronic warfare scientists to exploit a known processing vulnerability in the EL/M2084's signal integration algorithm. The radar did not go dark, it went insane. Inside the Iron Dome Battle Management Control Station for Battery Aleph, the screen that moments before had shown the clean green sweep of normal border surveillance suddenly erupted with hundreds of simultaneous tracks. False contacts flooded the radar picture at varying altitudes and speeds. Ghost signatures of incoming projectiles that did not exist. The system's threat prioritization algorithm, overwhelmed by the volume of phantom tracks, locked into a processing loop. The automatic engagement queue froze. The human operators, staring at a screen that had transformed from a clean radar picture into an incomprehensible cascade of blinking threat icons, had 11 seconds before the system automatically escalated to a Tier 1 alert status and contacted Northern Command Air Defense Headquarters in Haifa. They used 9 of those 11 seconds trying to understand what they were seeing. At 1:38 hours and 40 seconds, Northern Command Air Defense HQ registered simultaneous system anomalies across all 3 Haifa sector batteries. At the same moment, the duty officer received the first alarm. Battery Zion's radar track processor had crashed and was attempting to reboot. Battery Dalet was reporting 340 simultaneous incoming threats, a number that was physically impossible under any known threat scenario. Battery Aleph had gone into emergency manual mode as its operators attempted to override the frozen engagement queue. The Iron Dome network over Haifa was not destroyed. It was confused, and confusion, at the speed of modern warfare, is indistinguishable from blindness. At 1:39 hours, Commander Khouri spoke a single word into his radio handset, the Arabic word for dawn, Fajr. 47 Fajr 5 rockets left their mobile launchers in 12 seconds. The sound reached across the southern Lebanese hillsides like the tearing of metal. The exhaust plumes rose simultaneously, visible for 40 kilometers in every direction, painting the sky in orange before the warheads arced northward into the dark. 11 seconds later, the 12 Burkan 3 guided guided rockets ignited from their hardened positions, their exhaust columns narrower and faster, rising steeply before pitching over onto their ballistic trajectories toward Haifa Bay. Their flight time to target, 4 minutes and 18 seconds. At 1:39 hours and 30 seconds, the Israeli Early Warning Radar Network, separate from the Iron Dome EL/M2084 suite, operating on a different frequency band and therefore unaffected by MIHWAR-1, detected the launch. The Green Pine and ELM2080 long-range radars immediately began generating tracks. Alerts cascaded simultaneously to Northern Command, to the Israeli Air Force Operations Center at Palmakim, and to the Missile Defense Command Network. Air raid sirens began activating across northern Israel. F-35I Adir fighters on 10-minute alert at Ramat David Air Base received scramble orders. But the Iron Dome batteries covering Haifa, the first and most critical layer of defense against low and medium-altitude rockets, were still fighting their own radar systems. Battery Zion completed its reboot cycle at 0141 hours, but its engagement queue had lost all previously computed intercept solutions. It needed 22 seconds to reacquire, classify, and generate new fire control solutions for the incoming tracks now filling the display. 22 seconds is an eternity when rockets are traveling at Mach 2.4. Battery Aleph's operators, now in full manual override, were attempting to engage threats individually, bypassing the automated queue. They managed to fire 6 Tamir interceptors in rapid succession. 4 achieved intercept confirmation, 2 missed. In normal operations, a 4 out of 6 rate would be considered a failure scenario. Tonight, it was the best Battery Aleph could do. Battery Dalet, whose radar had resumed partial function after the duty officer physically cut and restored power to the signal processing unit, came back online at 0141 hours and 20 seconds. Its first automatic engagement fired 3 Tamirs in rapid sequence before the launch detection system flagged an anomaly in the track data. Not all targets were real. MIHWAR-1's ghost signatures were still partially corrupting the radar picture. Of the 3 Tamirs fired, 2 intercepted genuine Fajr 5 warheads. 1 detonated against a Phantom return, expending an interceptor against MP Air. This was the arithmetic Hezbollah had calculated. Not destruction, attrition. Every Tamir expended against a ghost target was a Tamir unavailable for the Bekaa 3s, now in terminal descent. At 1:42 hours and 8 seconds, the 41 Mohajer 6 Kasef drones launched from their sequential pods, rising in staggered waves to altitudes between 800 and 2,200 meters. They were not traveling at rocket speed. They were traveling at drone speed, 180 kilometers per hour, slow enough to arrive after the main rocket salvo, deliberate enough to find Iron Dome's interceptor inventory already degraded. Their terminal guidance cameras locked onto pre-assigned target imagery, the Kishan Naval Base perimeter, the Port Authority fuel transfer station, communications relay nodes along the coastal ridge. Inside Northern Command's hardened operations center, the duty general was receiving track data that described a threat environment unlike any previously war-gamed scenario. 59 confirmed inbound tracks, a radar network operating at reduced capacity, Iron Dome intercept rates performing below doctrine, and now a secondary wave of slow movers that threatened to exhaust what remained of the Tamir inventory before David's sling, designed for longer-range ballistic threats, could be effectively repositioned to cover the low-altitude drone layer. At 1:43 hours, the first Fajr 5 warheads that had evaded interception began impacting in northern Haifa district. The detonations were not catastrophic. The Fajr 5 carries a 175-kilogram high-explosive warhead, devastating against infrastructure, lethal in a civilian environment, but not the weapon of decisive military victory. The rocket struck residential and industrial zones in the Kiryat Hayim and Kiryat Atah districts, triggering fires and structural collapses. Emergency services were already moving before the sirens had finished cycling. At 1:43 hours and 50 seconds, Battery Zion's fully restored radar locked onto the Bekaa 3 tracks in terminal phase, and fired 4 Tamir interceptors in rapid sequence. 2 of the Bekaa 3 guided rockets were destroyed in the air. 2 were not.
The first Bekaa 3 impacted the outer perimeter of the Keyshawn Naval Maintenance Facility, detonating against a berthing infrastructure section. The blast radius was 40 meters. The second Bekaa 3 impacted the Haifa Bay Industrial Fuel Transfer Corridor, igniting a storage pipe junction. The resulting fire column was visible from Cyprus. At 1:44 hours and 20 seconds, Commander Khouri received the confirmation signal. Infrastructure impact confirmed. Radar suppression confirmed. Drone wave inbound. He allowed himself 6 seconds of silence. Then he transmitted the withdrawal order. The MIHWAR-1 vehicle's antenna array collapsed in 90 seconds. The crew mounted the trucks and began moving south, back along the pre-cleared route, before the Israeli Air Force's first F-35I Adirs reached combat patrol altitude over the Lebanese border. Israeli SIGINT had fixed the approximate origin grid of the electronic warfare emissions within 4 minutes of the jamming beginning, a faster response than Hezbollah's planners had modeled, but approximate is not precise. 3 Israeli precision strikes impacted grid references within 2 kilometers of MIHWAR-1's former firing position. The vehicle was already 8 kilometers south and moving. By 1:51 hours, as Israeli F-35Is and AH-64 Apache gunships scoured the southern Lebanese terrain for launch positions, finding only the still smoking exhaust residue of mobile rocket launchers that had already dispersed and gone cold, the MIHWAR-1 vehicle crossed back into its concealed compound. The antenna array was refolded. The vehicle was driven into a covered agricultural structure. 3 different cars with different license plates departed the compound in different directions, carrying the system's 3 lead technicians to separate safe houses. By dawn, the compound would appear empty to satellite imagery. The system had fired once. It had survived, and it would fire again. The Mohajer-6 drone wave encountered reconstituted Israeli air defenses for the final approach phase. With MIHWAR-1 offline and Iron Dome radar systems recovering, 17 of the 41 drones were intercepted by Tamir and airborne F-35I cannon fire before reaching their target corridors. 24 achieved terminal guidance lock. 14 impacted assigned targets. The Keyshawn Naval Base sustained damage to 3 shoreside maintenance structures and a communications relay. The port fuel transfer station fire burned for 11 hours. At 700 hours, with rescue operations still active across northern Haifa and Israeli Air Force strike packages executing retaliatory strikes on known Hezbollah infrastructure across southern Lebanon and the Bekaa Valley, Commander Khouri sat in a separate hardened location, reading the initial damage assessment. The casualties among Israeli civilians numbered in the dozens. The infrastructure damage was significant, but the operational message was the number that mattered most, and the number that would circulate in every air defense headquarters from Seoul to Warsaw. For 11 minutes and 40 seconds, the Iron Dome network over one of Israel's largest cities had been unable to reliably process incoming threats. Not destroyed, confused, blinded, overwhelmed. And the system that had blinded it was still in Lebanon, intact, waiting. This was not the opening of a war. This was a demonstration. A calibrated proof of concept transmitted not in words, but in radar ghosts and guided warheads. Hezbollah had just told every air defense planner in the world something they already feared in private. That active electronic warfare, deployed with sufficient precision against a radar-dependent point defense system, does not need to destroy the shield. It only needs to make the shield doubt itself. At the speed of a ballistic trajectory, doubt and blindness are the same thing. Israeli strikes continued for 3 days, targeting known and suspected MIHWAR-1 relocation routes, logistics nodes, and IRGC liaison infrastructure. Several Hezbollah commanders were killed. Communication cells were disrupted. But when Israeli intelligence concluded its damage assessment on day 4, the conclusion was classified at the highest level and shared only within the senior defense cabinet. MIHWAR-1 had not been confirmed destroyed. Its last confirmed location was a smoking farmland crater 2 kilometers from where it had actually been. The system was in the wind. Tonight, in a hardened compound somewhere between the Litani River and the Syrian border, a team of IRGC technicians is reviewing telemetry data from the operation, adjusting the jamming parameters, improving the ghost target generation algorithm based on the actual radar response data recorded during the 11 minutes of suppression. The next time MIHWAR
MIHWAR-1 fires, it will fire smarter, and it will fire longer. What would you do if you were the commander of Iron Dome's northern sector, knowing the system that just blinded your radar is still operational, location unknown, and your next deployment window is 72 hours away? Tell us in the comments, because the engineers writing the next Iron Dome software patch are asking the same question. And the team that built MIHWAR-1 already knows the answer.